Whitewater's Morning Scramble Tuesday morning, and Dr. Leon McClinton is in from residential housing at Oklahoma State. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for having me back. I cannot believe it's been almost a year since I was here the last time.
Yeah, and I think you brought a gentleman with you too.
I did, and you allowed us to talk about housing and our latest preparation, our latest plans for housing, and I can tell you, it's going to be a very different type of planning this year with the pandemic crisis, and we are constantly having meetings. I'm meeting with my leadership team almost every day because things are changing. But you know what? I'm a person that loves challenges, and so you can definitely say this is a challenge.
I guess
so. Hopefully you'll be able to have me on as we get closer to August to talk more in detail about our plans. I think you would be excited to hear about them.
And looking at what the rooms will look like, and I
Yeah.
can't imagine all the options you guys are having to go over right now.
Yes, we have to designate some spaces for quarantine purposes, and put up signage educating our residents on how to have good sanitary practices. So there's a lot. It's a lot.
And we're trying here. We scrubbed down with I sprayed everything with Lysol before we start every time.
I was about to ask you. I was about to ask you about it.
Could you smell it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I can. Yep.
Well, sometimes it's too strong for people, but that's going to continue, isn't it?
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
So,
Yes, it
well, good to see you.
Good to see you.
And we've
Steve.
been visiting, corresponding the last few days more than ever before, probably.
Yes.
But I didn't know you were from South Carolina.
I am from South Carolina. Spent most of my life there, and before we get too far into our conversation, that reminds me that my sister lives in Milton, Georgia, and I think she's listening. So you got a listener from Milton, Georgia today, and it's her birthday,
That's awesome.
and I want to wish her a happy birthday.
She doesn't teach school, does she?
No, she does not.
Well, I have somebody I haven't heard from for a while, obviously with all this going on, but they're a professor at the University of Georgia, and they went to school here.
Okay.
And then
okay.
I don't know what year they moved away, but when they went down there, the internet is an amazing thing.
Yeah,
They continued to listen,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
every now and then I'd get a note from Georgia, and it was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
So
really
hi
cool.
in Georgia this morning.
Yes, definitely.
So obviously, you just heard the end of we replayed a little bit of
Yeah.
Mayor Joyce,
Yeah.
and he was talking about
Yeah.
the issues of the day. And last week we had a demonstration here,
Yeah.
and he said he didn't speak; he was there to listen
Yeah.
and be a part of it and everything. But these issues are global, which is amazing when you see all the countries doing this.
Yeah.
But going up in South Carolina,
Yeah.
you had experiences that are resonating right now, right?
Yes, Steve. As I thought about our conversation, and it just made me reflect on my upbringing, and it's such an emotional and trying time for many of us, especially the Black community. And growing up in the Deep South, reflecting on my upbringing, definitely there were instances where you felt like that there was a significant divide between the Black and white community. But I was fortunate, really fortunate to have the parents that I had. I grew up playing basketball and felt like at one point I was going to be a great basketball player. So I would go to the parks and hoop it up with the guys that were really good, and so develop those relationships. But then around the 5th grade or so, introduced to tennis, and
Wow.
really took that on, and eventually started to play at the best country clubs in town, and going to junior tennis tournaments. And so really had an opportunity to interact with a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and so very fortunate about that. And
The one thing that you let me know ahead of
Yeah.
time, you sent me a text saying
yeah.
your dad couldn't have played at those.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking about that as my sister and I developed those tennis skills in a small town, and my dad was our coach, and he used to tell us, he says, these courts that you're playing on right now, when I was a kid, I could not play on them. And
Wow.
so that is an indication, or an example of where we have made progress. But I am here to also share that there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think that our conversation can definitely make some people cringe, but you don't grow or you don't develop unless you're put in an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. Can I ask how you were accepted among your peers then when you're playing tennis?
Oh, very much so. Well, I can remember going to the junior tennis tournaments, and my sister and I and my parents, we would be the only Blacks, at the tournaments, and so we had to learn how to um, navigate those settings well and communicate with our white peers, and because we could be ostracized if we did not
Yeah.
initiate conversations and initiate interaction. So at an early age, we developed those skills on how to interact and conduct ourselves in a predominantly white setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you talked about visiting friends and having them over.
Yes.
And sometimes
Yes.
it was
Yeah.
accepted, sometimes it was not.
Well, and that was very fortunate to have those parents that when thinking about my dad having to be a civil rights activist and fighting for his family, but he could have had the attitude that we're not going to have people that are not black over at our house. But very, very thankful that did not care what color, race you were, anybody could come over, and that wasn't the case in every household.
Yeah. You mentioned he was an activist.
Yes, absolutely.
When you talk about and I don't remember the decade very well. I was born in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I really don't remember it very well. But I appreciate also, and I've told you this before, I was telling you a story about my dad.
Yeah.
And so, where we went to, and I've told this on the air before, but he was what was called at that time a follow-through director, which would be special needs.
Yeah.
And one of his areas was in Mississippi, and they weren't funded. I mean, the black schools were simply not funded.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and when you're talking about, and this would have been the mid 70s.
Yeah.
And so he probably did some shady paperwork and was able to get some typewriters. But we borrowed a friend's station wagon. He did, and we went to Mississippi because it was the right thing to do.
Yep.
And as much as anything else, I think it was because it's the right thing to do.
Well, Steve, and that is a great story, and actually I have one that I think is pretty similar to that. During the time I worked at a different institution, and I remember he was actually overseeing diversity and inclusion at this institution. And for like probably a year, he would see me on campus, and he'd say, "Well, Leon, when you finish your doctorate, I want to talk to you about something." And so after the third time him saying that, I still hadn't finished. I said, "What do you want to talk to me about?" And so, long story short, he says, "Leon, I'm from the Pennsylvania state system, and I want us to, in the Pennsylvania state system, they have developed a program where black kids will have an opportunity to go to college after high school. And I'm interested to see, I want to see if you're interested in developing a similar program for the state of South Carolina." And my eyes perked up, and I said, "Absolutely. This is not part of my job, but I'm definitely interested in it." So that following week, he had a ticket for me to fly me up to Indiana University of Pennsylvania to talk to the guy that implemented the program in the state of Pennsylvania. I walk into his office, and it's a white guy. And I am stunned considering where I'm from, the Deep South, and I'm thinking, so I have to ask the guy, I said, "You are a white guy. Why have you committed your career, your life to helping black kids?" And he said, "Well, many years ago, somebody was talking to my father and said that, you know what, anybody can make something out of themselves if they pull themselves up by their bootstraps." And his father calmly responded with, "You know what? Some people don't have bootstraps." And I think that is something that we need to keep in mind as we continue to work and try to improve these relationships between blacks and whites. Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah.
And okay, so you went to school. Where'd you go to the University of?
I went to Clemson University.
Okay. No, we actually have lots of Clemson fans around here.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Because Terry Dunn Phillips was the athletic director here. He's over there.
Yes. Yes.
My friend Scott Petty. Do you know Scott?
Yeah.
With his daughter went to Clemson.
Yeah.
They're orange.
Yeah. Well, actually, the year before I left Clemson, Terry Dunn Phillips arrived at Clemson University, and I remember him coming to one of our divisional meetings and sharing some of his vision for the athletic department.
Did you know where you were going to go from there, or were you flying by the seat of your pants like most of us?
Well, I had an opportunity to go to Virginia Tech.
Oh, really?
Yeah, went to Virginia Tech. I stayed in housing, and so I was there for a few years and really enjoyed my time there.
Can we talk about life on campus a little bit?
Yes.
Because I think
Yes.
We like to maybe convince ourselves that things are so much better.
Yeah.
And I think they are better probably when you hear stories about not being. I was telling you I watched Meet the Press is what I was watching the other day, and there is a writer. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, and his name is Eugene Robinson, and he's from South Carolina. That's why it resonated. And my guess is he's 70. That's just my guess. But and he was telling, in my lifetime, I couldn't go to school with a lot of my friends. I wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
He couldn't eat in the restaurants.
Mm.
Segregation existed in his lifetime
Yeah.
in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about that. So we have made that advancement, but when you hear some of the stories, and 2 or 3 years ago, and I think we've heard some others, and not to call out the University of Oklahoma, but where
Yeah.
they had a fraternity that had
Yeah.
some issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are those more common? Those issues
Yeah.
more common than we'd like to think?
Yeah, they are. They are, and we've had some incidents on our campus, and within our profession, we are definitely trained and ready to mitigate those situations when they occur. But a few years ago, we had a couple of blackface incidents on campus, and they can tear a community up. And working with my staff, and when you've got black staff members that are really hurt by those incidents, and really want something to be done, and you want something, being a black leader in the community, in the campus community, you want something to be done. But in my position, I'm trying to figure out how to balance that to where I'm supporting my black staff members, but then also doing it in a way that it's professional and supporting the university's mission. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I had one of my white staff members come in and talk to me. He says, "I know you're in a tough spot." He says, "You're in a tough spot. You want to support your black staff members, but you have to be careful and not be too aggressive with the way you respond to these incidents. But then you've got white colleagues that you're probably never going to be fully accepted by them." And I remember that, and as I reflect on it, I'm thinking, why didn't I ask him to elaborate on that, or ask him why did he say that? And maybe I didn't ask him because I thought it was probably true. Yeah. And so we do have those situations that occur. Yeah.
When you watch the last few days, we've had the Drew Brees
Yes.
experience,
Yes.
sort of a little bit.
Yes.
And Drew Brees, and you and I talked on the phone yesterday also, and Drew Brees throughout his life has walked the walk.
Yes.
He's a man of very strong faith.
Yeah.
He's helped the New Orleans community in numerous ways, but he had a statement that was sincere for him at the time. Yes. But then within a day, and it was about the flag and the kneeling, within a day, teammates had spoken out, and he had what seems to be like a sincere apology, and basically he's saying, "I'm listening now." Can we learn from Drew Brees?
Yes, we can. We can. Like I said at the beginning, it's being a minority and being on the end of this relationship or this dynamic to where we feel we aren't being heard. It's hard for me to understand why all of us don't want to come to the table and have these tough conversations. I think, I try to figure a way, how can I convince, or how can I persuade or help people understand how important this topic is? And so I keep going back to, I think whatever we're involved in, whatever company that you're involved in, radio show or organization, I think you want it to be the best that it can be. I think we all want to be the best that we can be with whatever we're doing. And so I think the fundamental principle to being the best is being inclusive. And there's so many examples and so many stories. I always like to use sports analogies because they're so easy to understand, but you can apply them to other fields. But we know that if you create a setting or an environment where all perspectives can be heard and can be valued and be appreciated and be developed, we just make ourselves better. We make ourselves better. And I have sports examples. You may not want me to get into them, but I think they really make you pause, with some of these examples that I have.
No, I would. Okay. And you gave me a couple yesterday, but you could probably even find more than that, right? But give a couple that you want.
Well, and you think about, you think about I'm a big sports person. Like I told you earlier, I grew up playing tennis and basketball, and you think about tennis and golf, and two sports that have been dominated by the white community. And if you're someone that wants to be, I want us to be a global leader in all of these different sports. Well, when you think about who's made American tennis and American golf really succeed and been the best at it, you're looking at two blacks. You're looking at Serena Williams, and you're looking at Tiger Woods. You look at their upbringings are significantly different. You look at Serena, was brought up playing on public tennis courts with her dad in a sort of a dangerous area, but she was able to overcome that. And her dad had the wherewithal to expose her to that. But unfortunately, there aren't, a lot of kids in inner cities are not given the opportunity. And so we as an entire country need to make a concerted effort to try to expose our kids. You can say, if you don't want to say a specific race, because that could come across to some as being discriminatory, why not say kids that have come from a household of $19,000 to $21,000 a year? If you start looking at that, a lot of those kids that are coming from those households are black. And so as I talk, and I have so many white friends that have really reached out and have been very supportive and empathetic and said, Leon, how can we help? And I think that that's one way that we can help, is reaching out to those impoverished areas and helping those kids and exposing them, because you never know, if you may come across a kid that's given those tools or access to those tools, could be the next person to come up with the next greatest invention.
Well said.
Yeah.
Sports has played a role forever, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Because when I was a kid, I was a Cardinal fan,
Yeah.
and my two favorite players happened to be black, but they were just the best,
Yeah.
And they were also awesome. They're both still alive, and they've walked the walk their whole life. I think I was also part of the appeal was I knew they were good people. One was a guy named Lou Brock, who was and should still be the all-time base stealing champion.
Yeah.
Ricky Henderson came later, but that didn't count.
Yeah.
We all have our biases, and that was Bob Gibson.
Yeah.
And I listened to those games every night on the radio, and I knew what color they were, but that's who I wanted to grow up to be. And so the role model, the what they set for us, the example they set, made all the difference. And when you go back further than that, if you've watched the movie 42 on Jackie Robinson,
yes, absolutely,
and it's pretty much a true story. I think they've embellished it a little bit, but that's okay. With the Pee Wee Reese story, Pee Wee Reese is from Louisville, Kentucky, was a Southerner. And he was the shortstop. Yeah. Jackie Robinson was the second baseman, and even their own fans, didn't accept him at that time. Yeah. Between innings, when there's a dead ball at one time, he goes over, puts his arm around Jackie, and that changed the world. In a way,
it did.
And there's a statue of that very image.
It did.
And so, therefore, you had a white Southerner step up and make a difference because it was the right thing to do.
Exactly. You're talking about statues. It makes me think about, I was just reading in the paper today that the Army is considering getting rid of any, well, first of all, in Virginia, there's the huge uproar about getting rid of some statues that represent the Confederacy. And so the Army today talking about eliminating or getting rid of names that represent the Confederacy. And we are definitely witnessing a revolution right now. I think that the latest killings, they've been very brutal, very graphic, has really gotten the attention for the long term, I think, for our country.
Well said.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a brief time out. This won't be about a minute and a half or so, and then we'll come back and do another segment.
Okay.
This is also where we can regroup and say, what did we miss? What did we miss?
Okay.
So